The Cypriot authorities resurrected a liquidated offshore company in order to recover money from Abramovich. Just like that. They liquidated the offshore and now they've reinstated it so that Abramovich would have access to the money. It's not to recover money, but so that Abramovich's money can flow there. Now he needs somewhere to keep it, after all. There are big problems in the world right now. Now Abramovich will use the offshore again. And then, of course, come the Swiss banks. After all, it's still an offshore, a transit bridge. Kremlin economists have proposed obliging Russians to pay pensions to their elderly parents themselves. But who will pay? All the sons died in the meat assault. Ground meat can't pay money. They're gone already. Who will pay? Well, this is probably yet another mockery from the Kremlin. The Middle Eastern conflict has delayed the opening of a VTB branch in Iran. And who do you think the VTB branch in Iran is being opened for? Well, of course, for Russian wealthy military officials who are moving their money. This is what the branch is for. Right now, this money is in VTB. When the branch opens in Iran, this money will already be abroad. And here's one of the news items. The ruble is reacting sluggishly to the fresh multi-month highs in oil prices. But what does the ruble care about oil hitting new highs? The ruble and oil are two different things. The ruble is a worthless piece of paper, soon to become just wood pulp, while oil is sold in the West, in Russia. But not in Russia, friends. Here things work differently. So even if the price of oil goes up, even if it jumps sharply and unexpectedly, it truly doesn't really matter in any significant way to the value of the Russian ruble. It doesn't help the ruble. It's not Russian oil, but oil owned by Western investors. Let's put it in quotation marks, so to speak. Investors, Western owners. That's why the ruble doesn't react. The oligarchs' union has proposed training workers for Russia in India. A very good proposal. Notice Indians will go to Russia to be workers. There's no one left in Russia anymore. All their own white men have been sent off on meat assaults. And now they'll bring in Indians. They're excellent workers. It's nice to live in the East, scratch your belly and your heel, and lie in the scorching sun. That's about India. The Minister of Industry called to crash the ruble to 100 per dollar to support the economy. Iran's main friends didn't want to come to its aid after Israel's attack. How come? What about the Soviet Union? What about Russia? Russia is Iran. So who's supposed to help? China, Russia, Iran. That's who's fighting. And Iran, well, it's basically just like a new mask for Russia and therefore for China too. Who do you think is in charge of all these rocket launches at Israel? Well, of course, it's military personnel of Russian origin. Do you really think people of Arab nationality would be doing this? I think that's impossible. And you? VTB's client base in China has grown more than 30 times. Well, in China, VTB's base is growing, which means Russians are investing there too. And VTB is everyone's wallet. All the Russian oligarchs use it to move their money out. How else did you think wealthy people would get their money out of Russia? Through VTB, through the wallet that's universal for all millionaires? A criminal case has been opened against a resident of Irkutsk who called participants in the war in Ukraine murderers. That's easy to do. Say the wrong thing and you get 25 years in prison. Just like that. You don't think the way you're supposed to? And if you don't think the right way, you're like that little onion in Senor Tomato's cage. You're dangerous. You could make people cry because of you. People around you might start thinking smartly. That means you're dangerous. Off to prison you go. Russian banks have started denying mortgages to every other applicant. Well, I'd say probably to almost every single applicant. Mortgages aren't being issued now because the situation is too unstable, and no one wants to risk their money. The head of Severstal did not rule out the closure of metallurgical plants in Russia given the current ruble and interest rate. So our metallurgical plants and production are shutting down. Everything is closing. It's not about the current ruble. The point is, there's no one left to work. There's no one to work. Everyone is at war. And even the head of Severstal himself, if he suddenly comes to Russia, he could also be sent to the meat grinder assaults unless he buys his way out with billions of rubles. The owner of the Torpedo Football Club, Leonid Sobolev, and the club's director, Valery Skorodumov, were detained on the night of June 20th, according to two RBC sources familiar with the investigation. A criminal case has been opened against them. Sobolev and Skorodumov are suspected of attempting to bribe one of the judges to secure a decision in favor of the club. Is this the first time or something? It seems to me that this is exactly how all the decisions are made. Whoever pays more gets first place. According to a source, on June 19th, searches were conducted at their residences. Sobolev and Skorodumov's homes were searched. It's a matter of money. You have to share. The local military security forces will let me through. They came to Moscow poor, after all. Naturally, they're going to milk guys like these. The police are preparing to imprison 2 million Russians who sold their bank cards. They sold cards to criminals. What do you mean, preparing or getting ready? How are we supposed to understand these words anyway? What does it mean that the police are preparing to imprison 2 million Russians? That 2 million Russians sold cards to criminals? Of course, it's interesting to think about criminals among Russians, especially when there's no money, no jobs. All the men have gone to the front, only old people and scammers are left naturally. After the law introducing penalties for droppers, those who give fraudsters access to their bank cards and e-wallets, is passed, 2 million Russian citizens could face criminal prosecution. Well, nothing is clear, right? According to the deputy head of the investigative department of the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs, potential offenders, whose number is twice the population of cities like Volgograd and Perm, still have time to stop committing offenses in favor of fraudsters. And after the law is passed, you see, listen again, because I myself don't understand what they're trying to say. And after the law, which was submitted to the Duma in early May, is passed, we will accordingly come to their homes, as you understand, the ministry representative emphasized. He said this during the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. The Ministry of Internal Affairs already has information on 30,000 specific names of droppers. He noted that this information was obtained through cooperation with the central bank. According to the text of the bill, which was approved by the Federation Council on June 18th, amendments will be made to the article on liability for the unlawful circulation of payment means. In particular, transferring access to one's own account to third parties for personal gain will be punishable by a fine of up to 300,000 rubles or imprisonment for up to 3 years, for the purpose of subsequently carrying out illegal transactions. How can it be for third parties when you give access to someone? Let's say you allow your mother to withdraw money from your account, and this is considered a selfish motive. The same measure will be introduced for those who, at the direction of others, themselves participate in illegal financial activities using their own payment instruments. If access to the account is given not by the owner themselves but by a third party, the fine increases to 1 million rubles. And the prison term can be up to 6 years. You did nothing wrong. You just asked your mother to withdraw money from your account. And the prison term? Up to 6 years. But at least we understand that Russians have switched to pasta and bread after the price of potatoes rose by 200%. The vice governor of the Leningrad region, Igor Petrov, was found dead in his country house in Yuki. In the village of Yuki, in his country house, Igor Petrov was found dead. He called the speculations of Peskov's floaters golf. He called media reports about the possible use of US tactical nuclear weapons on a target in Iran speculation. And now again about eggs. But you can't pelt Russia with eggs. Starting from the beginning of 2025, there has been a steady decline in retail egg prices in Russia. According to Rosstat, their price has dropped by more than 20%. And now, on average, a dozen costs buyers 60 rubles. There are clearly no conditions for returning to the Russian market right now, said the CEO of Inditex. According to him, a decision to return might be made in a more favorable geopolitical environment. Trump's involvement in the Iran-Israel conflict has sparked discussions about his ability to simultaneously coordinate US participation in the negotiation process on Ukraine. He has already demonstrated this several times. His dissatisfaction with its pace. In addition, on June 16th, the United States canceled consultations with Russia on resolving points of contention. However, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mark Zakharova emphasized that Moscow expects the pause will not last too long. The likelihood that the Trump administration will completely withdraw from the negotiation process. But as I understand it, that's simply impossible. The flash mob in support of Sotsky essentially failed, and unfavorable information about this was spread. Supposedly, the party's PR division failed to create the image of an unquestioned leader. However, the threats against the rebels about expulsion from the party ranks have also not been carried out. The LDPR Supreme Council never convened for this purpose. And Sotsky himself tries to avoid this topic on his personal social media. Moreover, the same Nilov, who previously directly named those who, supposedly, are driving the spirit of Zhirinovsky out of the LDPR, has just announced a nationwide party reception for voters, mentioning those same names, but now in a neutral tone. In short, it seems that neither Sotsky nor his opponents were advised to stir up a big scandal. They were simply told, hush. Guys, the power will be divided without you. The Chelyabinsk authorities have set a goal to try to improve the region's ecology as soon as possible by moving harmful production and polluting enterprises outside the major cities. Oh, how clever he is, just a real genius, that's all. He moved it to another place, and that new place will immediately grow into a new city, and everything will be exactly the same. You see, the thinking starts from the wrong end somehow. Or maybe the ends are so far apart you can't reach them. The government has approved Russia's borders in the Baltic Sea. The Russian government has approved a list of geographic coordinates defining the baselines for measuring the width of Russia's territorial waters in the Baltic Sea. The document has been published on the Legal Information Portal. In early June, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte called the Baltic and Black Seas NATO regions and stated that the alliance is ready to deliver a devastating response to any unforeseen circumstances. At the end of May, Chairman of the Maritime Board, Nikolai Patrushev, stated that NATO is increasing its naval presence in the Baltic and working to strengthen its intelligence capabilities. But here, friends, let me tell you that you really need to look at this from the other side. It turns out that Patrushev is the chairman of the Maritime Board. Patrushev is the chairman of the Maritime Board. So the Black Sea was given up long ago, and the Baltic Sea as well. You see, general secretaries, by their very nature, don't make mistakes. Of course, they are indeed allowed a great deal of leeway, but when the esteemed NATO Secretary General explicitly tells us that the Baltic Sea and the Black Sea are unequivocally NATO regions, it profoundly means that these strategically important regions have long been, in actual fact, truly NATO regions, not yours and certainly not Russia's. The Far East is a region of China. Let's take a look at who is encroaching on Russia. That is, on the maps we see everything shaded in one pink color. So this is Russia. But in reality, is this Russia or has it not been Russia for a long time? I believe it hasn't been Russia for a long time. That's exactly why the special military operation, that's exactly why the entire male population was sent off to meet grinder assaults. Neural networks have started helping the authorities solve crisis issues in the new regions of the Russian Federation. By using neural networks, we process the information we collect, identify the most pressing issues, and make suggestions. For example, in the LNR, this is how the issue of closing bridges for repairs was resolved. We expect that in the near future this project will be scaled up across the entire country, and we will be able to speed up the response to social demands and even act preventively. Top managers in Russia want to earn more than what employers are offering. Ilya Podsevatkin, co-founder of the IT Solution and Director of Strategy and Development at Inetica Agency, on the reasons behind the observed gap between salary expectations and actual offers on the job market for top managers. The gap between top managers' salary expectations and market offers is influenced by the lack of unified standards. The IAEA has collected information regarding Iran's nuclear program, are hardly grounds for any kind of military action. This was stated by the head of the organization, Rafael Grossi. According to him, there are no signs of a systematic nuclear weapons production program in Iran. Israeli authorities justified the start of bombings of targets on Iranian territory by citing a recent IAEA report stating that Tehran is enriching uranium to a significantly higher level than other sovereign nations that do not possess active nuclear weapons programs, which unequivocally constitutes a serious violation of international non-proliferation commitments and agreements. In other words, to put it quite simply and straightforwardly, what the esteemed head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, said is that Israel specifically referred to some rather significant IAEA documents and conclusions, and under the pretense, supposedly, allegedly, and once again allegedly, of Iran not complying with certain agreements, Israel was the first to strike. Voila! Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated that a change in Iran's leadership is not the goal of Israel's military operation, but it could become its result. The question of regime change or the fall of this regime is, above all, a matter for the Iranian people. There is no alternative to this. This could be the result of the operation, but it is not the stated or official goal. According to Netanyahu, Israel has the right to eliminate all of Iran's nuclear facilities, regardless of whether US President Donald Trump decides to join in or not. The document that Israel referred to is invalid. Essentially, it does not exist. It's just an inflated sham. But Israel had the right to eliminate all of Iran's nuclear facilities simply because they wanted to, and started a war across the entire Middle East. U.S. intelligence agencies believe that the Iranian authorities may begin developing nuclear weapons if the U.S. attacks Fordo and if Israel kills Khamenei. President Donald Trump fears that Iran will become another Libya if the government falls. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. This was reported by the tabloid The New York Post. These concerns were the reason why Donald Trump postponed the decision for 2 weeks on whether the U.S. would enter the military conflict between Israel and Iran. Remember Libya and remember Iraq. They were trampled. Good, wealthy countries. They were trampled. One leader was killed, then the second leader of the country was killed. They were brutally destroyed, crucified, torn apart in front of everyone. But it turned out that the Americans simply made a mistake. Just made a mistake. Now there is no country and no millions of people torn apart by that war. Now there's a new war. And again, at the core, there is a phony bluffing document. Well then, now Iran will destroy Persia. To gain access to what? Then there we have Azerbaijan and Armenia. All that will come later. But first it starts like this. It all starts with a small mistake. I am Tanya Karatsuba.